I just made one of the most unique quilts I've ever made with these tiny little scraps I have. It was so much fun bringing this together. Let me show you what I did. Okay, so first I gathered up some of the jeans that I have laying around the house that aren't really worn anymore. I cut my jeans down to 6.5-inch squares, and keep in mind that both sides of the jeans, the right side and the wrong side, are perfectly fine to use in this project. And it's particularly fun because if you just have one or two pairs of jeans, one side might be slightly a different color than the other, so it'll give you a more diverse look on the quilt if you use both sides. Next, you may want to cut your scraps down into strips if that is the look you are wanting. You could use whole pieces of scraps in this or strips like I did. I was going for a patriotic theme. You may notice that I'm having mine look a little bit like the American flag, just a more abstract version, if you will. But this will be a fun project with any type of color scheme you want to go with. Then you'll want to find some circles to use. I decided to use two different sizes of circles just for a little more unique, diverse look, but it'll be fine with just one size. The only rule you'll really want to stick to is you won't want to get too close to the edge of your 6.5-inch square. All right, so here's what you're going to do if you're using a whole piece of scrap, so not one piece together. So decide what side of your jeans you want to be on the front. So I want this side to be on the front with this fabric because the other side is kind of a little too dark, I think, for this fabric. So we're going to work from the back of the fabric. And this was the first thing that was a little bit hard for me to remember. We're going to work from the back of the jeans, and then we're going to work from the back of the fabric. So we're going to lay it down and center it. You can do measurements if you want. I just kind of eyeballed it. I mean, this is a more abstract looking quilt anyway, so why not just eyeball it and have fun? And then choose the size circle that you want, center it, and then just draw around the circle. So this is a erasable friction pen. However, since this is going to be the back of the fabric, if you're using something that won't erase, in this instance, I think it's fine. All right, and then we're just going to stitch around the circle. I'm working from the back. I feel comfortable doing that because I know that my stitches are going to look fine on the other side too. So just keep that in mind. Now I set my machine up to a wider stitch length because I think that looks nicer when we move to looking at the front with a longer stitch length, but you may want to test on some scraps of jeans and fabric just to see what stitch length will work good for you. Something that I think works really well here is once you get your fabric under the machine and get it situated and lined up to stitch around the circle, is to bring the bottom thread up to the top. So drop your needle down and up, and then pull that bottom thread through. This will ensure that you don't get a lot of bunching of threads on the other side that is going to show up on the front of your project. So once we have that bottom thread up, kind of hold it with your hand, and then you're just going to slowly stitch around the circle. These can be tight turns, so if you notice you're not going smoothly around the circle, raise up your presser foot a little with the needle down so it doesn't shift out of position on the circle, and then just slowly stitch around. I have found that going slow and being patient with this is what is definitely needed. You'll see me continuously adjust the presser foot. All right, so now that I'm back around to the beginning, I'm going to raise up my presser foot and I'm going to pull the threads out so that I have longer threads. And then that thread that's still at the well, what would be the front of my project, I'm going to actually pull it to the front with my other threads that I have here. And then I'm just going to tie all these threads together on the back of the project so that they don't come undone. So I'm just going to put a few knots in here. It doesn't need to look pretty because it's going to be hidden on the back. All right, and then I cut off all this excess fabric around here about, you know, at least a half an inch to a quarter inch away from the threads. It doesn't need to look fancy. I just don't want all the excess bulk on the back of my project. All right, and then we're going to cut out inside of our stitched circle so that we can see the fabric we put on the other side. So I pull the fabric away from the jeans so I can feel it's pulled away, and then I just cut a little hole into the jeans. And then I'm going to cut up to maybe about 1/8 of an inch or more away from the edge of the stitches. All right, and so there is how the project looks, just one block finish. So let me show you how to do that with some strips. So one thing to keep in mind is you'll want to cut your strips long enough to go past the circle size you choose. So this one won't work well with this larger circle, but the longer strips will. So just sew your strips together. It doesn't matter if some of them are longer than the others. And then press it really well with some heat to get all these seams nice and flat. All right, and then again, we're gonna place it face down on the back of the jean square, center it, trace around the circle. And then just as before, we're gonna stitch slowly around the circle. So I'm gonna bring that thread up to the front just so I don't get any bunching on the front of this project, but the back of where we're stitching. So I'm just going to slowly go around the circle just as before. So I'm just going to sew a few stitches past my starting stitches, and then I'm going to bring my needle up and pull this project out and cut where I have a few longer pieces of thread. Pull that thread up from the other side and just tie everything off again. All right, and I'm just going to trim off some of this excess fabric again. Doesn't have to look pretty on this side. And then again, I'm going to cut around this side, pulling the fabric away so that I don't accidentally snip through it. Just put a little snip, just enough to get my scissors in. And then I'm going to cut close to the edges of the stitches, but not through the stitches. And so there you go. There are two options. You'll just want to make as many of these blocks as you want to make your wall hanging or a larger quilt. I do want to share another fun block that I did. I thought this turned out really fun as well. And all I did was I sewed around to make a circle, but did some extra little swirls and went off on a little journey to make these openings to cut out around to peek out some other fabric. And on the other side, all I did was made sure that my fabric was as large as my square so that I could cut out these other little areas to show some extra pieces of fabric and just make it a little more fun and interesting. So this is also an option that you could do to just be a little more unique with your reverse applique. So after getting all of my squares sewn, I laid them out in a way I liked, and then I just started sewing my rows together. I did pin a lot here because this jean fabric is pretty stretchy. After I got all of my rows sewn together, then I brought my rows together to form the quilt. I pinned at all of the seams so that I could hopefully keep all my rows from shifting again because these jeans were very stretchy. I just did some simple quilting right along the seams to quilt this wall hanging. I didn't put any batting in because it was just going to be a wall hanging and the jeans were already pretty thick and heavy on their own. Then I added this fun star binding and my wall hanging was done. I really had so much fun making this quilt. It was a lot of fun doing something a little new, a little more unique for me, and I really love how it turned out. It's going to be the perfect wall hanging to put up during the month of July. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.